Imagine a state nestled between the four Great Lakes, home to over 10 million people, spread across two separate peninsulas. Yet despite possessing almost all of its freshwater resources, 80% of its population lives south of that line. So why does that vast, almost empty northern portion belong to Michigan? And why don't people live there? The answer is hidden on the map. A quick glance at the map reveals a state sandwiched between four enormous lakes: Huron, Michigan, Erie, and Superior, Michigan. This is a fascinating place, home to over 10 million people spread across two separate parts, peninsulas. But what's truly surprising is that despite having access to some of the world's largest freshwater reserves, over 80% of Michigan's residents, Michiganders, are concentrated south of that seemingly invisible line. So why do so many people choose to live in only a small part of the state? And an even more fundamental question: how did Michigan acquire that enormous Upper Peninsula in the first place? The answer is more about land disputes and the brutal realities of geography than you might think. Today on GeoAtlas, we're returning to America's Great Lakes region and focusing our lens on Michigan. Our goal is to unravel why its population is so unevenly distributed. Because, of course, there's a solid geographical reason behind it, and that's key to a historical debate. Let's examine some of the terrain and history. Imagine a state that, while its neighbors have become part of the country, remains outside. Then, a war breaks out, but no one dies, and in the end, in exchange for the tiny piece of land it lost, it gains a brand new peninsula almost as large as itself. That's how Michigan's story begins. Michigan, also known as the Great Lakes State, is a relatively new member of the US, yet it has a surprisingly deep history. In fact, while its neighbors like Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois had already achieved statehood, Michigan was still waiting at the door. Of course, the story goes even further back, long before European explorers set foot on this land to its true owners. The Ojibwa, Odawa, and Potawatomi tribes ruled the region we now call Michigan. They led a semi-nomadic life based on fishing, hunting, and trade, adapting to the harsh winters and generous summers of the Midwest. These three tribes were also part of the Anishinaabe peoples, a larger linguistic family that encompassed the entire Great Lakes region. However, this millennia-long dominance was disrupted by the slow but steady pressure of European settlers. The first Europeans to set foot in the region were French explorers, who arrived in the early 1600s. They established important fur trading posts and missions, such as Sault Ste. Marie and Mackinac Island. These new visitors brought with them territorial losses and diseases like smallpox that ravaged the indigenous population. France controlled Michigan until 1763, when, at the end of the French and Indian War, it ceded the region to the British. During the American Revolutionary War, control of Michigan, a strategically important region, shifted back and forth between the British and the Americans. Finally, the region officially came under US control with the Treaty of Paris in 1783. However, British troops did not completely withdraw until the War of 1812. Now, part of the Northwest Territories, Michigan, began to experience an influx of American settlers, encouraged by the Northwest Act of 1787. But the real boom came with the completion of the Erie Canal in 1825. The canal accelerated migration by providing an easy waterway from the East Coast to the Lake District. The 1830s were the most critical decade for Michigan on its path to statehood. The Michigan Territory applied for statehood in 1835, but this sparked a border dispute with Ohio over the Toledo Strip, known as the Battle of Toledo. In this largely bloodless political struggle, the US Congress intervened and awarded the disputed Toledo Strip to Ohio. To appease Michigan, it granted it the territory we now know as the Upper Peninsula. This bargaining paved the way for Michigan's accession to the Union as the 26th state on the 26th of January, 1837. Michigan's early economy relied on lumber, minerals, and furs. However, with the rise of the automobile industry in the early 1900s, it transformed into a manufacturing hub. Michigan continues this legacy today, hosting three of America's biggest automotive giants: General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. As a result, Michigan's history is a complex tapestry encompassing multiple Native American tribes, two European countries, and an internal conflict within the US. And all this history is directly linked to the state's fascinating geography composed of two large peninsulas. But before we get to Michigan's geography, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. More fun geography content is just a click away. Imagine a state with two separate heads. One is a region teeming with wilderness and mines, almost uninhabited. The other is dotted with cities, factories, and plains. That's exactly Michigan's geography, and the distance between these two peninsulas is enormous, not just physically, but economically and demographically. Why? Geographically, Michigan has many unique features, thanks to its proximity to four of the five Great Lakes: Superior, Michigan, Huron, and Erie. The state is divided into two main land masses: the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. These two land masses are connected by the Mackinac Bridge, one of the longest suspension bridges in the world, stretching just over 4 miles. The Upper Peninsula is a rather special region of the state. One reason is that it is the largest landmass of any state that is not directly connected to it. In total, the Upper Peninsula makes up about 1/3 of Michigan's total land area. This vast region, rich in mineral resources such as iron and copper, which fueled a mining industry in the mid-1800s, also harbors a large amount of untouched wilderness. Today, the Upper Peninsula is less populated and therefore retains that sense of pristine wilderness. In contrast, the Lower Peninsula is more diverse in its urban geography, but generally flatter. The state's largest city, Detroit, is located here in the southeast, near the Canadian border. The region offers a mix of fertile farmland, forests, and urban centers. One of the most striking geographical features is its coastline, stretching along the Great Lakes and totaling over 3,000 miles. This makes Michigan the 9th state with the longest coastline overall, and the state with more freshwater coastline than any other US state, a geography that has an incredible impact on Michigan's weather. However, although the state mostly consists of two main peninsulas that are quite close to each other, there can be significant differences in their climates. In general, the entire state has a humid continental climate characterized by cold winters and warm summers. However, the Great Lakes moderate the climate to some extent, making winters slightly milder and summers cooler than other states at the same latitude. Lake effect snow is also a common phenomenon, especially in areas near the lakes, leading to heavy snowfall in winter. Furthermore, Michigan's geography has played a significant role in its human history and economic development. The abundance of natural resources such as timber and minerals fueled its early economy, while extensive waterways facilitated trade and transportation. In the 20th century, the flatlands of the Lower Peninsula became manufacturing and industrial centers, paving the way for the state to become one of the most prosperous states in the country by the mid-1900s. But while Michigan experienced a boom in the early and mid-1900s, this growth and development was not evenly distributed across the region. The Upper Peninsula and the northern part of the Lower Peninsula never fully caught up with the growth experienced by the southernmost part of the state. This is a reality that is still clearly visible when you look at a population map today. In a state, can 80% of the population live on only 1/3 of the land, leaving the rest of the vast peninsula almost empty? That's exactly the case in Michigan. And could there be a more brutal factor behind this imbalance than climate? The answer lies in the economy, and to some extent, a gift from the 19th century. The stark population density disparity between Michigan's northern and southern regions is quite interesting to examine. Roughly speaking, about 80% of the state's residents live in the south, while the northern regions house only about 20%. Within this scattered population, the Upper Peninsula accounts for only 3% of the state's total population of 10 million. That's roughly the size of a district in Istanbul, spread across an entire peninsula. One of the most significant factors fueling this imbalance is economic opportunity. Southern Michigan is an industrial hub, with Detroit famous as the center of America's automobile industry. Historically, this has attracted a large workforce to the region, leading to urbanization and population growth. In contrast, the economies of the northern regions are more limited and generally rely on natural resources such as timber and mining, which have declined over the years. While tourism is a significant source of income for the North, it mostly offers seasonal employment and is insufficient to support large populations year-round. But it's not just economics. Physical geography also plays a key role. The rugged terrain and harsher climate of the northern regions, particularly the Upper Peninsula, are less conducive to large-scale agriculture and settlement. The lack of major highways and limited public transportation options further exacerbate the isolation. On the other hand, the southern half enjoys a milder climate and flatter terrain suitable for agriculture and urban development. Of course, access to basic services is another factor contributing to population imbalance. The southern regions are physically closer to other population centers, such as Chicago, Indianapolis, Cleveland, and even Toronto in Canada. This makes trade and travel much easier for the southern part of the province. In contrast, residents in the northern regions often have to travel considerable distances to access similar urban amenities, which is not very attractive for most people. In conclusion, the southern region of Michigan is home to over 80% of the population, just over 8 million people. This population is overwhelmingly dominated by the Detroit metropolitan area, with approximately 4.4 million people. Other major metropolitan areas in the South include Grand Rapids with about 1 million, Lansing with 550,000, Flint with 405,000, Ann Arbor with 367,000, and Kalamazoo with 265,000. In contrast, the northern region has far smaller urban areas. Saginaw, with approximately 190,000 people, is the largest metropolitan area in the north. Further north, Traverse City follows with about 153,000 people. Marquette, with 67,000 people, holds the crown as the largest city in the Upper Peninsula within the entire metropolitan area. So, we're talking about a population that many large cities might struggle to fill a single football stadium with. However, while the Upper Peninsula is Michigan's least populated region, it could actually be part of Wisconsin today had it not been for the Toledo Strip dispute with Ohio, that infamous Battle of Toledo. In trying to console Michigan for losing Toledo, Congress inadvertently gifted it this vast, wild, and sparsely populated territory. In a strange twist of history, this has permanently shaped Michigan's identity while also impacting its demographic map. What happens when geography whispers this land should belong to Wisconsin, while history and politics say the opposite? Michigan's Upper Peninsula is living proof of this paradox. How does a state gift a vast strip of wilderness, even larger than itself, in exchange for a tiny strip of harbor it lost? The answer lies in one of history's strangest and most profitable deals. Although geographically closer to Wisconsin, Michigan's Upper Peninsula belongs politically and administratively to Michigan. The story behind this intriguing arrangement dates back to the early 1800s, to political bargaining, resource sharing, and a small but impactful conflict known as the Battle of Toledo. In 1835, both the Michigan Territory and the state of Ohio claimed a piece of land known as the Toledo Strip. This area at the mouth of the Mai River was considered valuable because of its proximity to Lake Erie and the promise of a thriving port city. The Battle of Toledo was a bloodless dispute, mostly involving militias, intimidation, and political posturing, but it posed a major problem for the U.S. Congress. Michigan could not be admitted to the Union as a state, while it had an unresolved territorial dispute with another state. Congress intervened and negotiated a deal. Ohio would retain the Toledo Strip, but Michigan would be compensated with a large tract of land taken from what was then the Wisconsin Territory, now known as the Upper Peninsula. Many at the time considered this a bad deal for Michigan. The Upper Peninsula was seen as a remote wilderness, lacking resources, far from Michigan's population centers in the Lower Peninsula. However, the agreement proved unexpectedly profitable for Michigan. Shortly after the agreement, rich iron and copper deposits were discovered in the Upper Peninsula. These mineral resources proved extremely valuable, transforming the region into an economic powerhouse in the late 1800s. The mining boom attracted settlers and investment, and while the Upper Peninsula never became densely populated, it became a vital part of Michigan's economy and identity. Had the Battle of Toledo not happened, or had the congressional compromise favored a different outcome, the Upper Peninsula would very likely have become part of Wisconsin. Geographically, this would make sense, since the Upper Peninsula is connected to Wisconsin by land. However, historical events unfolded in such a way that the region was given to Michigan, and this had lasting effects on the state's economic and cultural structure. Michigan is a unique state, consisting of two fairly large peninsulas surrounded by freshwater. This situation has allowed it to develop a large industry and population for decades. However, as in many states, the majority of this population is located in the most geographically advantageous place for trade, in this case, the southernmost and not the northernmost. I hope you have learned more about Michigan's population distribution and the interesting reasons for it having the Upper Peninsula. If you liked it, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. If you want to watch another one of my videos, you can click here. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.